Welcome to the Men in Blue Podcast. Now, here's Kevin and Adam. Men in Blue.
Welcome back to the second episode of the Men in Blue Podcast. I am Kevin Tucker, along with fellow Orlando Magic fanatic, Mr. Adam Elamari. What is up?
How's it going?
Oh, not too bad. We're back and better than ever. First off, thanks for all of those who listened to our very first podcast last week. Again, as we mentioned, this was our first time doing anything quite like this, so we appreciate those who listened in, but also those who have offered some constructive criticism and some tips and some advice on not only ways to improve our podcast, but things to talk about. We've seen some comments on Reddit, and also you can hit us up on Twitter at Men in Blue Pod, or on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Men in Blue Pod. Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, hit us up anywhere. If you've got some suggestions, some ideas for the show, please hit us up in those areas of the social media interwebs. So today is going to be a cool episode. Obviously, we've got some time before the season kicks off. We'll be kind of kicking back and forth between some season preview things coming up ahead, but today we're going to take a step back in time, if you will. So last episode, we looked at the schedule release. We looked at some of the big games and big stretches of games in this upcoming season. We're going to go back a little bit. What we're calling this episode is the What If episode. So in the history of this franchise, there's been a lot of defining moments, if you will, and some of them could have gone a variety of different ways. So today, we're going to unpack some of these big moments in the history of our Orlando Magic franchise and say, what if? What if things had gone differently than they did? This will be a fun one, I guarantee you that. So let's just jump right in. We've got kind of 5 key what if categories, if you will. And we're going to start way back. The beginning of one of the successful eras of our franchise. We have the draft where we drafted Chris Webber. Now people look back and say, yeah, we drafted Penny. No, we drafted Chris Webber, and there was a deal that went down, and we ended up grabbing Penny Hardaway. But what if we had just kept Chris Webber and paired him with Shaquille O'Neal? Adam Elamari, your thoughts?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think that's not one where you can definitely say what if this happened, this would have been a better situation. Right. I don't know. Obviously, with Penny, we went to the finals, so that it's right there in terms of the ultimate success. And there's a nice little story there with Penny Hardaway and Chris Webber. It started, I think, when Penny Hardaway met Shaq at the making of the movie Blue Chips.
Yep.
If you remember that gem. And he worked out with them. They played around, and they had a great chemistry. This would have been Shaq's rookie year that he went there, or maybe his last year in college. But Penny, it would have been his rookie year because Penny was a prospect at that point. And so, 93 draft. Everybody thinks we're taking Webber. Webber's the best player. He's coming off those Fab Five teams. Yeah. Everybody knew his talent level, and Penny was kind of this, this unknown.
Sure.
And obviously, he had some athleticism. He's a tall point guard. 6'7" point guards don't come around too often. Mm-hmm. He had the handles. And they got along really well in that movie set. So Penny's really, really wanting to play with the Magic. And he gets the feeling that the Magic want Webber. Of course we do. Obviously he's the best player.
Right.
So Penny's just completely adamant about coming to this team. And he walks into John Gabriel's office and says, if you take me, you won't regret it. So, yeah. And, you got to like that. You got to like the confidence. And so Don Nelson, at the time, running the Warriors, calls, talks to our management and says, okay, we don't care who you take, Sean Bradley or C-Web. We'll take Penny. We'll trade you Penny and 3 picks for your trouble. So that happens, and the rest is history. We we had 3 good years with the Penny, 3D and Shaq and Horace Grant.
Yeah.
And it kind of fizzled out. That was a sad story. Grantland did a great piece on that called the, Blue Chips, actually. And that chronicles, gives you, it's a great read it if you have any time.
Yeah.
So if we don't draft C-Webb and trade him, and we just keep him, you're talking about C-Webb and Shaquille O'Neal, 2 of the most dominant players, I think, during that era.
Yep.
And I don't know who would have ran our offense, but it's hard to say that really matters when you have those 2 guys. Who knows?
Right.
Your thoughts?
Yeah. The biggest question obviously would be the backcourt, which was taken care of when we grabbed Penny. Historically in the NBA, we've seen backcourt, frontcourt pairings that were successful, and I'm sure that's what our front office was thinking when we did that swap and got Penny. You're thinking a guy to dominate the backcourt, a guy to dominate the paint, and it makes sense, and it's been successful throughout the history of the NBA. Honestly, we're asking some what-if questions. If you were to ask me, what would you do, I would have probably done the exact same thing, especially with hindsight. I don't know if Webber and Shaq could have been as successful. I definitely don't think they would have been as fun to watch as Penny and Shaq. Would we have won a title with Webber and Shaq? I think that's entirely possible. I mean...
And you also have to look at the comparison between C-Webb and Horace Grant. I think Horace Grant was we're talking about this situation. Obviously, we said on the podcast before that we weren't around for these years.
Right.
We didn't actually actively watch the team as we do now, but we went back. We know the history really well. And
yeah.
we know what kind of player Penny was. We know what kind of player C-Webb was. And I know what kind of player Horace Grant was, who was a great player. And you kind of have to weigh that versus C-Webb. Obviously not the same talent level, but...
Yeah.
Those pieces fit together. Sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. Yeah, Adam was talking about Adam and myself. If you missed it, we put out a bonus episode earlier this week, just talking about who we are, kind of our story with the Magic. As he said, we're both younger guys. We're both in our early 20s, so we weren't around for this era, but we're as informed and knowledgeable of Magic history as there is out there. Obviously, we didn't live it, but we've tried to be diligent in understanding the historical context of the Orlando Magic. But anyway, you can go back and take a listen to that if you're interested. But as for this question, what if? There's the question of what if for the Magic side, do we win a title? Something that really intrigued me when we talked about this was what would that have done to Shaq's career? If you pair him with Chris Webber, does Shaq become Shaq, the Shaq that we know now, the great Aristotle, the big Aristotle, one of the greatest big men of all time? Does Webber pairing with him in the front court kind of weigh Shaq down? Does it make him not as dominant and not as Hall of Fame worthy? That's a legitimate question.
Well, C-Webb wanted to be he didn't want to be a back-to-back guy. That was
Right.
the whole thing. Golden State, what kind of fell out there, because I think he only played there maybe a year or 2.
Yep.
And Don Nelson wanted to run an offense with C-Webb at center, and C-Webb wasn't having that.
Yep.
He wanted to be a guy that shot threes. You kind of saw that in Sacramento. He displayed his range. Obviously, he was a great passer. I think he was one of the best power forwards as far as passing.
Absolutely.
And I think, that's a good question. Maybe having them together, kind of detracts from each of their games, but I think they still end up being Hall of Fame level guys.
Yeah, that would have been interesting. So we ask, what if? We also, if you wanted to ask, let's draw a line here. Let's get serious. Adam, if you're in that position, looking back, obviously hindsight is 2020. Do you keep Webber? Do you trade him for Penny? Go.
I am actually going to say I'm still going back and forth on it. I keep C-Webb.
Wow.
Looking back, it's tough to say. They went to the finals, but looking back, C-Webb held up better. Penny, when he got hurt, who knows if you can't really say if we're going to win a title.
Right.
That's kind of the reason Shaq left. I mean, there's a lot of reasons Shaq left, but Shaq left, in '96, and the C-Webb would have been drafted in '93. So I don't know if Shaq's expectation would have been to win a title.
Right.
So I don't think either one of those players would have won a title by '96. Now, if you stretch it out and look at what if they were playing into the 2000s?
Right. Man.
I think C-Webb and Shaq were dominant into the mid-2000s.
Yep.
And Penny obviously had his injury history. So who knows what he could have been like. But, I mean, I think you have to weigh that in a little bit. Penny didn't really hold up.
Yeah, we remember those early 2000s, Shaq and Chris Webber, that Western Conference, man, especially with those two. They were outrageous. So you're exactly right. If you project more into the future, into those 2000s, it's a no-brainer. It's an absolute no-brainer. Chris, I mean, again, obviously, barring injury, I mean, Penny would have been right in there in those early 2000s, barring injury. But
Penny was Kobe-level talent, I think.
No doubt. If you ask me, you drive a very, very hard argument there. That's an extremely great point, talking about going into that next decade. I still think I'd take Penny. Trade for Penny. The temptation there to have that backcourt, frontcourt duo was too great, and it would have been too great for me because, again, having that 6'7" guy run your offense, and as dynamic as he was, paired with this superstar big man, that was pretty tempting for them, and I probably would have done it as well. So, again, if Webber's on the team, do we win a title? Who knows? I think you make a great point. Those late 90s, early 2000s, if they were still on the team, do they win a title? I think they probably do. But who knows?
And I mean, you can't really say that this would have been on the table, but Penny was drafted in '93. 7 years later, we got T-Mac.
Right.
Could you imagine that backcourt duo?
Yeah, that's nonsense.
Yeah,
that's the.
I mean, the
part.
main thing would have been just to keep Shaq. That's really the whole point. I think if you keep Shaq, you win a title either way.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, the other main question out of all of that would have been our entire backcourt. What does that look like? Not necessarily our backcourt. I guess we had part of that already established. But as far as who ran our offense, and would they have been enough to facilitate a championship-winning team? I think you or I could probably run point for those two guys and at least won some games. But anyway, what a way to open up with our draft what ifs. That's as big as they come. What if we what if we keep Webber instead of Penny? There's a couple other big draft what ifs in Magic history. We're going to fast forward a bajillion years, it seems like. 2004, there's these two big men. Everyone knows they're going 1 and 2, and most people think they know the order. There's this guy, Emeka Okafor, coming out of UConn, University of Connecticut. The entire world wants the Orlando Magic organization to take him. He's proven. He's won a national championship at UConn. And a lot of people think the Orlando Magic should take him. We end up shocking everybody. I remember literally the NBA, the ESPN broadcast of the draft was shocked at the news that we were taking Dwight. What if we took Emeka Okafor like the rest of the world thought we should have?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite ones. I actually will. I'm not trying to sound like Nostradamus, but I wanted Dwight. I really wanted Dwight. I'm a big potential guy. That gets me in a lot of trouble with my predictions.
Yeah.
But I loved his. You can kind of see because obviously Dwight was extremely skinny coming out of high school.
Oh yeah.
We're talking 6'10", 6'11", maybe 230, 240 pounds.
Yep.
And with these skinny big players, you can always see a frame that can be built on. You saw it with Dwight. You saw it with Anthony Davis.
Yep.
And you see the wide shoulders, and obviously that's what Dwight's kind of is. That's his bread and butter, is how big his shoulders are.
Yep.
And yeah, I remember reading a newspaper. That's the first time I heard about Dwight. I remember reading a newspaper probably 6 months before the draft, And I was like, huh. I went and YouTube wouldn't have been back there. I just Googled whatever I could about him. And I saw he had these crazy numbers. Obviously, he was playing in Christian school leagues. I don't really know the talent of the other teams, but he was tearing it up in national circuits. He was in the McDonald's All-American game.
Yep.
Played excellent in that. And Emeka Okafor, yeah, I saw the appeal with him. He was proven, but I always just saw him. I didn't see him as that offensive force.
No.
I have my nitpicks about Dwight's offensive game, and Emeka doesn't have one anyways.
No.
Emeka's a great shot blocker, but I didn't really want just a shot blocker.
The thing with Emeka, and again, hindsight is 20/20, but obviously the explosiveness of Dwight is from another planet. And forget. I'm not just talking about dunks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about raw ability to go crazy. I mean, he could jump out of the building. You didn't see that out of Okafor. The ceiling for Okafor, again, it's easy for us to sit here and say this.
Well, Okafor was a safe pick.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think every analyst back then was saying the potential for Dwight is higher.
Right.
But Emeka was the safe pick.
Right. So this is the easiest of these draft what-ifs, and maybe the easiest of all of them. You ask the question, what if we drafted Okafor over Dwight? Okay, let me just tell you, Emeka Okafor hasn't played an NBA game in 2 seasons, at least. And even during his time in the league, he wasn't much more than a shot blocker. Okay, he won Rookie of the Year, first year. He averaged double digits the majority of his career. I'll give him that. I think his career average was 12 or something like that. So maybe I'm being a little harsh saying he wasn't much more than a shot blocker. But again, the ceiling for him was so much lower than Dwight. His rookie season, he averaged 15 points a game, and that was his career total. What does that say about his ceiling? I mean, as his career high, excuse me. What does that say about his ceiling, His rookie year was his best year offensively.
You got to go back also and put yourself. I say that I wanted Dwight, but if you put yourself in the GM shoes back then, we're coming off losing T-Mac.
Yep.
And we're looking at Steve Francis, Kelvin Cato, and Coutinho Mobley.
Good Lord.
So you kind of had to pick you had to knock it out of the park with the pick.
Right.
I kind of feel like it's a number 1 pick, and I love our GM had the balls to. Yeah. It would have been John Weisbrod would have drafted him.
Yep. It's interesting because, again, when we put it in the context of the season that we had just come off of, one of the worst in NBA history, and again, we lose our star player. It would have been extremely tempting, and I'm sure it was, to take the guy who just won a national championship and put butts in the seats, sell some tickets. Obviously there's a potential to have a superstar there and a future for the franchise. That would have been the safe pick. That I'm sure that tempted them, like I said, again, to put butts in the seats after you come off an abysmal 2003-2004, add a little life into the franchise, a little bit of life into the fan base. But he didn't go for that, and the entire general management didn't go for that. It was a ballsy move. They rolled the dice, and I'm just going to say it worked out because, like I said, Emeka Okafor hasn't played a game of NBA basketball in 2 years.
Yeah, I just think in his heyday, Dwight was the second best player in the league, right there next to LeBron.
Yeah,
and it's just obviously an easy what if.
Yeah, definitely. Let's be clear, Dwight should have won an MVP.
2011.
Yeah. No, I still don't know why he didn't win it, but
because Rose was the sexy pick.
Right. But what can you do? So yeah, that's an easy what if. No buts about it. We would have been in disarray as a franchise. I mean, we would have had serious mediocrity. And you could talk about maybe Emeka Okafor if he's put in a different scenario. Maybe he thrives better.
Yep.
I mean, there's always that argument. You never know. I mean, at the end of the day, he did average a double-double in his first handful of years, whatever it was. Was he ever going to climb past that, 12, 13, 14 points, 10, 11 rebounds?
I think his ceiling was Mutombo.
Yeah, exactly. So at the end of the day, we'll take it. It was a great decision by our franchise, and we'll take it. Last draft what if before we move on. And this is going to be a little, not necessarily harder, but less to go on because it's more recent. 2013. Wow, it was 2013. It's already been 2 years, I guess, since we drafted this young guy out of Indiana University, Mr. Victor Oladipo. What if we passed on Victor Oladipo? Okay, so we have the second pick of the draft, right? There are plenty of options on the board. I say plenty. That was I'd say a weaker draft compared to some of the other drafts we've had over the past 5 years or so. What if we pass on Victor Oladipo? And I guess in order to answer that question, you have to look at who else was around in that draft, who else was available. What if we pass on Victor? What other options are going on there?
Well, I think there are a couple options that you could argue maybe we should have done. In my opinion, I want Oladipo. I'm good with him. Yeah. I think he fits in with what we're trying to do. He's a defensive-minded pit bull of a guard, and I think he's going to make that jump this year. But there's some guys on this list that I wouldn't be too mad about having either. I'll start with Giannis Antetokounmpo, who I think has arguably a higher ceiling than Oladipo. The thing with Oladipo is he's a couple years older than everybody else that he was drafted with.
Yep.
He was a junior coming out of Indiana. Giannis is in some, I don't know, it could be in Greek middle school. I have no clue, but he was like 18 or 19 when he was drafted. Right. Depot was 21 or 22, and he's named the Greek Freak for a reason. Excuse me. And he's another guy that he could fit right in with what we're trying to do. Yeah. My good God, could you put him? If you put him back there, can you imagine the wingspan if you just put those guys next to each other with him and Aaron Gordon? Yeah. And Tobias Harris. And
what a stud. I mean, especially last season, took a huge leap. That dude has some serious potential. I guess this what if question goes down to, is there anyone else in this draft you'd rather have right now and going forward than Victor Oladipo? I think, obviously, Greek Freak is a very reasonable suggestion. I don't know if there's anyone else even in the conversation about that, and maybe I'm biased.
The other guy I would throw out there is Rudy Gobert.
Sure.
I really, really like Gobert, and I think, ooh, man. Now, I'll say I'm a huge Vooch fan. I think he's one of the best skilled big men on the offensive end.
Right.
But we all know he's his shortcomings on the defensive end.
Yes.
And Gobert is Defensive Player of the Year type player. Just a complete force back there.
Yep.
And I love his game, and he's one of the reasons why I think Utah is making the playoffs this year.
Yeah. And
who knows, if we take him, then I don't think he fits back there with Vooch, so we might have to make some movement there.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
I also love Gobert, especially, again, another example.
The Stifle Tower.
Yeah. Another example of a guy who took a huge leap last season. No sophomore slump for him. Again, I guess Victor took a huge leap as well, particularly in scoring, I guess. But if you ask me, again, like I still lean towards Giannis. But honestly, I don't know if I take them right now over Victor Oladipo. I think you could make an argument for the other two. But if you were asking me right now, is there anyone else from that draft that I'd rather take? I don't think I would have anyone else.
I'd probably have to sleep on it. I really like Giannis, but I love Victor, and I think his personality, I just love his vibe.
Right.
He's just a well-rounded player, and not to say Giannis isn't. Obviously, Giannis has a lot of personality. He's got some pretty funny YouTube videos out there.
Yeah.
But the other guy that you could also throw in there is maybe MCW. That's Michael Carter-Williams.
Yeah.
And I don't see it. I think he had a really good year on a really bad team.
Yeah.
And he really padded those stats, and I think he developed some poor habits.
Yeah, definitely.
But he's going to be a defensive player, and I think that whole Milwaukee team has got a lot of potential.
Yeah, I think we have to at least mention him. Obviously, he won Rookie of the Year that year, so he had a fantastic rookie season again, maybe more statistically than otherwise because of the state of that team. But if you ask me right now, would I rather have him over Victor Oladipo? No, definitely not. I'll definitely take Victor over Carter Williams. I still think I take Victor over all of those guys. And I think we're looking good going forward with him. We talked about other guys making the improvement. Victor made a huge improvement this year, like I said, particularly in scoring. He averaged 17 points a game in his sophomore season of the league. That's fantastic. You have to think going forward with a coach, and again, we'll talk about all these kinds of things in player profiles and other season previews. I don't want to get too much into it. But I honestly think this year with a coach, and I hate to make fun of Jacques Vaughn because he's a great guy and all that, but with a coach that could really take care of some of this younger talent and develop them, you have to think the future is so bright for Victor, and it is likely brighter than at least the vast majority of the rest of that draft class.
I agree. I totally agree. He's type, he could be. Some people say Dwayne Wade.
Yeah.
He's at the very least. I think he's a 20 points per game, a guy that can guard the other team's best player 1 through 3.
Yep.
And I think with him and Elfrid Payton, they really complement each other. And Tobias Harris, we've got we'll get to it on our player profile podcast. But there's just so much to like about this team, and Oladipo fits really well.
Yep, definitely. I wouldn't trade him for anybody from that draft class. All right, so that's our first big chunk of what ifs, the draft what ifs. And really, at the end of the day, that might be the biggest what ifs. I mean, we'll have some more particular detail what ifs here in a moment. But as far as big picture Orlando Magic history, as with any franchise, the biggest what ifs are draft related for the most part. There's always big decisions to make, blah, 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 blah. So those are the kind of the big picture draft what ifs from Orlando Magic history. This next one is a very interesting what if, and along with another what if we'll talk about in a second, kind of leaves a bad taste in the mouth of Orlando Magic fans, not necessarily because of one individual who didn't come to Orlando, but because of the two individuals that did come to Orlando weren't able to make quite as much noise as we had hoped they were going to. There was a chance in the summer of 2000 that we ended up with a big three before the big three became a thing with the big three in Boston. We were supposed to have Tracy McGrady, Grant Hill, of course we had those two, and then this guy by the name of Tim Duncan. There was talks that he was going to join the Orlando Magic. What if we ended up with that truly dream big three of T-Mac, Grant Hill, and Tim Duncan?
Ooh, I don't think anybody would disagree with that being probably the best team, and at least one of the best teams in the league.
Yeah.
I think them and the Lakers would have been a perennial finals matchup.
Absolutely.
Pairing them with Doc Rivers too as our coach at the time, I think, that's too bad that didn't happen, because it was really, really close. I don't mean to name drop, but I actually ran into John Gabriel one time, and I asked him, how close were we to getting Tim Duncan? And I'll say he just said it was really, really close. Yeah. And you could see the look on his face that, man, if that paid off, we would have won some. We definitely would have won some titles.
Yeah.
T-Mac and Tim Duncan. Oh, and Grant Hill.
Right.
Coached by Doc Rivers.
Right. And
that's too bad.
Yeah, and let's not forget, Magic fans, we think Grant Hill, we think of injuries. This was Grant Hill coming off of an outrageous stretch where he was one of the premier players in the entire league. He was superstar quality that was expected to only expected to improve. Putting him with Tracy McGrady, who at the time was this young gun, and that's the other thing, I guess the other part of that is Tracy McGrady wasn't the Tracy McGrady that he became in Orlando. Obviously, he was a superstar player, but pairing him with Grant Hill and Tim Duncan, a young Tim Duncan. Not only was this team going to be good right away, it was going to be good for a long time.
Oh man, I mean, and Grant Hill, if he wouldn't have gotten injured, you can't just throw him in there as if he's the third banana. This is a guy that almost averaged a triple-double.
Yeah.
And Tim Duncan, I think, is the best power forward ever, and I think T-Mac is one of the best scorers ever.
Definitely.
Tim Duncan has held up pretty well. He's still playing. We're talking about T-Mac and Grant Hill, who have long been past their peak or even somewhat of a resemblance of a franchise type of guy. And Tim Duncan, you can make the argument he's still a top 5 power forward or center, whatever category you throw him into.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, pair them with Doc Rivers. Again, Doc was young. But what was that? 99, 2000. Yeah, the Heart and Hustle year. He took that team almost to the playoffs. They were at 500, 41-41, with a team of scrubs. Obviously, all Orlando Magic fans love that team. I don't mean that in a negative or derogatory manner, but let's be real. Those were scrubs. Those were other teams. They would have been bench warmers at best, and you have to really chalk it up to Doc propelling that team very nearly to the playoffs. He won Coach of the Year that year, and so he was riding a high as well. Pair him with T-Mac, with Grant Hill, with Tim Duncan in that Eastern Conference, which at the time it was coming off of the Bulls in the late 90s. Obviously, there was some transition as to who.
It was Barron.
Yeah, right. Yeah, as to who was going to be the premier team in the Eastern Conference. And obviously it bounced around as far as 99. It was the Knicks went to the finals, the Sixers and Indiana and all those kinds of things in the early 2000s. It was a revolving, New Jersey with Jason Kidd. It was a revolving door of who was the top team in the Eastern Conference. This team would have been tops in the Eastern Conference, and I really think, like you said,
without a doubt, without any question,
it would have been Magic Lakers at least 3 or 4 times in a row.
Yeah, because you think about the West, it was back and forth between the Spurs and the Lakers. You take Tim Duncan out of that equation, I don't think the Spurs, reached that talent level.
Oh, yeah.
And, like you said, Indiana's great. Reggie and Jermaine O'Neal and a lot of other pieces, Mark Jackson, and New Jersey with Jason Kidd, Richard Jefferson. Yep. It's just, that doesn't sound at all like Grant Hill, Tracy McGrady, and Tim Duncan. That's at least 3 titles, if you ask me.
Yep, definitely.
That's a what if. That's and one thing I want to get across is we're not sitting here moping around about it. We know we're just having fun talking about these what ifs that could have led to a huge success for our team, and we certainly know that other teams have had it worse with their what if situations.
Yes,
and we like thinking about, man, we could have been a top 10 all-time NBA team, I think.
Yeah, that trio there, again, barring injury.
Injury is the main thing you got to say, too.
Right, especially with Grant Hill, and then T-Mac dealt with some injuries, but obviously nothing close to what Grant Hill went through. So the more I think about it, that's a pretty big what if, especially because Tim Duncan was so close to coming to Orlando. I feel like I feel like he was open about this recently. I can't remember where I saw it, but basically saying, yeah, I'm glad, obviously, that I was loyal and stayed with San Antonio. And obviously, it worked out for him. It worked out for San Antonio. I'm happy for them. I have no, obviously, ill will towards San Antonio. I love their franchise. I love Greg Popovich and the system that they have from top to bottom. It's first class, and obviously they've been proving that on and off the court, winning titles with really quality stand-up guys. It's been great. But there's always going to be that little what if in the back of my mind. What if Tim Duncan came to Orlando? That would have been some fun times. But what can you do? We move on. So we talked about the draft. We talked about Weber and Penny. We talked about Okafor, Dwight. We talked about what if we passed on Victor Oladipo. We talked about that potential big 3 in the summer of 2000. Let's fast forward numerous years. This is a what if that could have really kind of wrecked not necessarily our franchise. Our franchise would have been okay, but it would have wrecked our local fan base. The question is, what if we didn't get the new arena deal? Obviously referring to the Amway Center. So if you're not familiar, maybe you're a newer Orlando Magic fan, there was a time in the late 2000s, and I wish I could pinpoint a year when I think the year the deal was finalized. I want to say 07 or 08. I'm thinking 08 when it was finalized. But the years prior to that, you got to think about the state of the Magic. Again, obviously 03, 04 being the lowest point. We're 21-61, 17 game losing streak or 19 game losing streak. Things were rough. We draft this no-name rookie, essentially no-name, unproven rookie, I should say. And our future is questionable. We have some okay years, nothing great, from 04 through basically till the Stan Van Gundy era, basically whenever Brian Hill was there. And the state of the franchise was really in limbo. There was extreme conversations about the team leaving. That's what this comes down to. Most people around the league were convinced that the Orlando Magic were going to leave. And let's be real, the front office of the Orlando Magic was going to leave if we did not get the new arena deal. Okay, so again, if you're new to the franchise, we had an old arena, obviously Amway Center, and we'll talk about that in a second. The gift really that is. But our past building, Orlando Arena, TD Waterhouse Center, Amway Arena, whatever you want to call it, had plenty of names. That's because it was around for so long. It was around, built in the late 80s and around for 20 years. It was old. In NBA terms, essentially a 20-year-old arena is getting old, especially when you consider technology from the late 80s to technology of the early 2000s. It was a completely different ballgame. You had these really beautiful and fantastic arenas going up all over the country, and here we were stuck with, at the time, I think it was the second or third oldest arena in the league, even though it was only 20 years old. The team, the franchise, the front office was convinced, not necessarily convinced, I should say, but they were adamant. They were going to leave if we didn't get a deal. And maybe they weren't entirely public about that, but looking back, hearing things that we've heard since, this team was going to go.
Yeah.
And so there were tons of potential destinations floating around out there. The biggest one, the one that I remember reading the most, and I really think was the leading candidate, more than likely, was Kansas City. Kansas City has a great fan base of all their sports teams, Chiefs, Royals, etc. The Kansas City Magic, obviously you never know if they were going to change the name or whatever, but that would have been interesting. The other location that was thrown out there, I remember, was a second Chicago team. We talked about, obviously, at the Bulls, there was talk of us being, Chicago 2, basically, kind of like Los Angeles has Lakers and Clippers. That would have been very interesting. I don't know. It's hard for me to picture Chicago fans moving away from their Bulls, specifically after the 90s that they had with Michael Jordan. Obviously, they were a decade removed from that, but it's hard to let go of a team like that, especially when they've been around for so long. At the end of the day, as much as a lot of us probably don't appreciate or don't enjoy or don't like the politicians of Orlando and Orange County, they were the reason that this got done. And to be quite frank, they're the reason that the Orlando Magic are still in Central Florida. Can you imagine what if we didn't get that new arena deal? The Magic would be gone.
Yeah, totally. It was much needed at the time. The Amway Arena, for those who've been to it, it's not the best thing.
No.
It's not the best thing for a basketball game. The seats are uncomfortable.
Yep.
I don't mean to complain about minor things, but in comparison to the rest of the league, it just wasn't that great.
Sticky floors.
Sticky floors.
That's all. That's all. If you've ever been there, all you can think of is sticky floors. Obviously, if you're down, in the lower levels, in the the rollaway bleachers that were metal, plastic, whatever, you didn't experience that. But the concrete levels, it was sticky floors.
Mm-hmm. and only no luxury suites, just 26 skyboxes. I'm looking here at the list. 26 skyboxes is all they had as far as any sort of, I guess, suite type of seating. Amway Center, 32 Founders Suite, 28 President Suite. Luxury boxes, MVP tables, all-star decks, bars everywhere.
And let's be very clear. Yeah. Those amenities are nice, but the reason the team wanted / you could argue needed a new building was money, obviously. Those suites and VIP places and blah, 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 those things bring in money. That's why all of these teams that are building new arenas and building new, stadiums, if you're talking about football or whatever, they're building all these luxury boxes because they're making a ton of money off of businesses and wealthy people and et cetera, which is fine. It's a business, I get it. But at the end of the day, that was the biggest reason why they wanted a new arena deal, because if they didn't get it here, they were going to go somewhere else that was dying for an NBA team. For example, Kansas City, which still you read about every once in a while, still trying to make some noise for possibly getting either an expansion team or a potential moving team, which right now I don't see any teams moving. There's talks. I mean, not necessarily legitimate talks, but you can hear some on the internet of people suggesting maybe some team could be leaving soon. I don't see that happening. Side note, going back to the Amway Arena, the old Orlando Arena, and then we'll move on. Two things. As nasty of a dump as it was, sticky floors, whatever, that place had some character and that place had some volume. I mean, the seats, especially the upper levels, were right on top of the court. It was loud. The second thing, you were talking about the skyboxes. I don't know if you ever got to see those skyboxes. I went on a tour one time. I never obviously attended a game up there. Those things were way up there.
Yep,
I would have hated to watch a basketball game up there. So it's no wonder they wanted to leave. All the people and businesses that were renting out the boxes couldn't watch the game, so they probably stopped. But anyway, at the end of the day, what if we didn't get a new arena deal? Would I have followed the Orlando Magic if they moved to Kansas City? That's a question. I don't know if I know the answer to that. Would I have been a Magic fan?
I wouldn't have been able to handle it.
Yeah,
there's no way. And it was actually 2006 that the deal got finalized.
Oh, so really? Wow.
Yeah, I think they broke ground in 2008, and yeah, it was an interesting way they chose to finance it. Something to do with bonds, and I know the Magic fronted them $50 million.
Yep.
Luckily for the Magic, we have a good ownership group.
Yeah, one thing is for sure about our ownership group, obviously led by Rich DeVos. He's proven, and they have proven, that they are willing to spend the money when the team is on the line, essentially. When you're talking about player personnel, you're talking about when he spent the money for Rashard Lewis. Obviously, that took us to new heights. And then we talk about this arena deal. Now, granted, would he have spent that money in another city? Of course, if the county and the city hadn't approved the new arena deal. But he's proven, obviously, again, by fronting all that money for the arena, that he's on board with his team, he's on board with his franchise, and we are obviously very, very grateful for that.
Totally. It's great to have an owner that, definitely shows that he's got the resources to back us up. We've seen so many stories where owners just don't get along that well with their franchise stars because they're not willing to spend.
Yep.
And, it's good to know that we probably won't have that problem. We've seen it time and time again.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. All right, that's the what if. What if we didn't get the new arena deal? Would we be the Kansas City Magic? Who knows? Moving on to you could debate maybe whether this is the biggest what if or not. For me, this is the biggest what if in Magic history, just because I think these are the what ifs that kept us from a title. I'm talking about the 2009 NBA Finals. Okay, we've talked already. It was pardon the pun, a magical year. It really was. I hate to use our team name, but it really was. It was a year that those of us who were able to enjoy it, we will never, ever forget 2009, the playoffs. Forget the fact we made the finals. It's the way we made the finals. It was an amazing year, an amazing run. All sorts of firsts, all sorts of records, all sorts of games we really shouldn't have won. You could never win a Game 7 in Boston. We did. You're not supposed to beat LeBron. It's going to be the puppets in the finals. We did. It was an amazing run.
Yeah, I was just going to say that was the peak of my fandom.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So we get to the finals. The reason why these are such big what ifs, and here's the thing, there's like a handful of these, okay? The reason why it's a bunch of little what ifs, but in the grand scheme of the series, these made all the difference. Okay, it was a 5-game series. People look at that at the surface and say you had no chance. This was the closest 5-game series I think I've ever seen because of games 2 and game 4, really. Both went to overtime. Both we had the chance and probably should have won both. And it comes down to these what ifs. I'm going to start with game 2. This is probably the biggest what if. Game 2, it's tied. Closing seconds. I remember Kobe driving left. Turk blocked him from behind. It was great. There was less than a second left, maybe 0.8 of a second left, whatever we call time. Turkoglu inbounds, and he lobs. Okay, maybe it wasn't perfect. Maybe it was inches off, but it was a great lob to Courtney Lee. And
makeable shot, totally makeable shot.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. I've tortured myself, as a lot of other Magic fans have, I'm sure, and will watch this over and over again. I've tried to analyze it. I've tried to give Courtney Lee the benefit of the doubt. Was it a tough shot? Maybe it was a little bit. Should he have made it? I think he should have. We should have walked out of Staples Center with a victory at the buzzer from a lob to Courtney Lee. I genuinely think that. So you ask, what if? What if Courtney Lee makes that layup? Because at the end of the day, let's be very real, it was a layup. He honestly should have made it.
It was wide open layup. I mean, I don't blame him. We got to remember, it's his rookie year.
Yeah.
And he's in the finals.
Yes, absolutely.
Coach draws up a play for him to win a game in the finals.
Right.
And it's right there. It's just, and then if you want to throw in another little what if there's another second on that clock, Dwight dunks it back in.
Yep. Oh, yeah, he was on that follow right there. Oh, yeah, he followed it right up.
So, yeah, he kind of had to grab it out of the left. Courtney did, and then kind of bring it around and lay it in. But I think he makes that shot more times than not.
Oh, absolutely.
If he tries it over again.
Absolutely.
You know? So
that's
again, definitely
yeah, you talked about it being his rookie season, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to sound like I'm bashing Courtney Lee. I have no ill will towards Courtney Lee. I loved Courtney Lee.
He was great for us. We needed him in that run.
Fantastic. Absolutely. He was, even though he was a rookie, he was a glue guy. He did everything Coach wanted him to. He gave it all out on the court every single night. I'm not bashing Courtney Lee. I still root for Courtney Lee. Still a great player. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I still root for him. I still want the best for him. But, man, I will never look at him the same after that night because, again, I love the kid. I guess he's not much of a kid now, but if he makes that, think about this. If he makes that, not only, forget the series, we're up, I mean, not up, obviously, it'd be 1-1, going back to Orlando for 3 games. Remember, this is back when it was 2-3-2 format. Now it's 2-2, 1-1-1. This is back when we were going home to Orlando for 3 straight games. We would have the chance to win the finals in Orlando in Game 5. We have all of the momentum in the world. We just won in Los Angeles at the buzzer, coming off of a Game 1 that was truly a nightmare, one of the worst games in the franchise's history. We got blown out of the water. We responded well. And instead, we miss at the buzzer. We kind of fall apart there in the overtime period, and we go back to Orlando down 0-2. So you say, what if? What if it's 1-1 going back to Orlando? Do we win the series? You could make that argument. You really could, especially when you look at us winning. We won Game 3, and then Game 4 was as close as Game 2 was. Obviously, anything could have happened. Kobe could have flipped the switch in Game 3 and said, screw you guys, and scored 81. But
that's what most people always say, I think. You know, you can't really say, later results would have happened.
Right. If
previous results turned out differently.
Of course not.
But that Game 2 layup, it's the first thing I think of if I ever see Courtney Lee in person.
Absolutely. Yeah, you might have to ask him that if you see him in person.
Funny enough, he made a layup very similar to that one in this past season.
Yes, he did. I remember seeing that.
Sir, I want a layup.
Yeah, I know. And I was
alley-oop.
Yeah, and I was thinking, where was this 2009? Like, come on, bro.
It's the first thing I thought of.
Yep, absolutely. And I'm sure Magic fans all over the place did. So that's Game 2. Game 4 had a lot of small what-ifs, but at the end of the day, Game 4, we should have won more than Game 2 because we choked Game 4. There's a few things to look at here, okay? Mm-hmm. first off, we had a 5-point lead with 35 seconds left. Okay, so how I remember it, Turkoglu hits, maybe a 20-foot jumper with like 1.5 minutes left to give us a 5-point lead. We couldn't extend the lead over the next minute. We also didn't concede. The lead didn't shrink over a minute. I just remember it was about 35 seconds left, and the Lakers have the ball. We're up 5 points with 35 seconds left. Oh, it makes me angry.
Oh.
They come back the other way. I think Pau Gasol had a dunk, layup, something like that.
Yep. He had a dunk going down the middle of the lane. I remember that.
Yep. So we come back, offensive end. Dwight's fouled with 11 seconds to go. We're up 3. And Dwight Howard, our superstar, our hero, goes to the line. In the back of our minds, we're thinking about his free throw woes, but in the front of our minds, we're thinking, oh, great players knock him down in big moments. And he misses both. He misses both free throws, and it's still a 3-point game with 11 seconds remaining. This what if, you could just say, what if Dwight makes one free throw? What if Dwight makes one free throw? It's 2-2. Forget the Courtney Lee game.
Just one.
Free throw. It's a 2-2 series.
Yeah. And then, Derek Fisher hits that shot.
Yeah, that's my other what if is, okay, so if you don't know the rest of the story, Dwight misses the 2 free throws. Lakers get the ball, march down the court because some poor defense. And it's capped off by Jameer. Again, they're down 3. They need a 3. What does Jameer do? And I love Jameer. Again, I'm not bashing the guy. I love Jameer as much as anybody. But he backs off Derek Fisher, one of the most clutch 3-point shooters of all time. And Derek Fisher knocks down his patented left-handed 3 to tie the game up.
I still remember the smirk on his stupid face.
Oh, my Lord. It was awful. Awful. So those are some what-ifs.
You knew it was going to happen, too.
Oh, absolutely.
They're taking this game in overtime.
Absolutely. And you kind of knew the second Dwight missed those free throws. We've been here before with a guy missing some free throws in the finals, looking back to 95. It was predictable, and it's a shame. It really is. Like I said, Game 4 had so many little what ifs. What if Dwight makes those free throws? What if we hold a 5-point lead with 30 seconds left? What if Jameer just steps up and puts a hand in the face of Derek Fisher? All of these what ifs. Any one of those goes our way.
Another one is what if Dwight just makes because the shot he got fouled on, where he got the 2 free throws, it was a shot that almost went in. It would have been an and
that's
one.
A great point. Yeah. If that goes in, it's game over. There's a weaker what if. You could argue at the end of regulation, Mikael Pietrus had a shot. Again, I think it was right around from that same area that Turk made that shot earlier, about 20 feet. What if that goes in? It wasn't a bad shot. It was online. It was pretty close. What if that goes in? We win at the buzzer. Again, it's 2-2. There's one more what if from this game, and I promise I'll let it go after this. It's in overtime. I think there's like 30-some-odd seconds left. It's tied. I think it was 91-91. And Kobe's backing down. I think it was Mikael Pietrus as well. He's backing him down. Jameer comes over to double, and Kobe swings his elbow. Hits Jameer right in the jaw. And there was talks of flopping. No. He hit Jameer right in the jaw as he turned and passed to Derek Fisher. I think he was top of the key. I think it was straight away. And, of course, Derek Fisher drains that 3 to put the Lakers up 3, and we didn't recover after that. What if that foul is called on Kobe? Who knows? It's our ball, 30-some-odd seconds left, chance to win the game, blah, 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 blah. Again, Game 4 was just full, and this whole series, full of so many what-ifs because it was so close. Things could have gone differently. We could have won the series. We could have been NBA champions. You can talk about it all day, blah, 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 blah. It didn't happen. If it did happen, maybe we win. Who knows? We could probably talk about this all day. I know I could talk about the 2009 finals all day. It's something that's near and dear to my heart. I've tortured myself and gone back and watched it I don't know how many times, especially these 2 games, 2 and 4. But what can you do? Maybe we win the series, maybe we don't. Who knows? But we got to move on.
Yeah, bring in just those memories just bring up just sadness and grief.
Yes, absolutely.
Moving on.
Yeah, as great as 2009 was, it didn't end the way we wanted it to. But anyway, here's another huge what if, and this is our last big what if of the night. And it's one that's still fresh in Orlando Magic fans' hearts and minds. We had this big man who led us almost to the promised land there in 2009 by the name of Dwight Howard. Things kind of fell apart basically 2010 and beyond. If you've probably been around the team long enough to know what all transpired there. But the question, the last what if here is, what if Dwight stayed? It's a question that kind of remains to be unanswered because we haven't necessarily seen where Dwight will go. Obviously, he's bounced back from his injury pretty well. I don't think he's still up to the Dwight that we knew. Let's be very clear.
Never will be.
Yeah, I don't think so. Anytime a big man has an injury to the back like Dwight did, I don't think we'll ever see him back to his Orlando days, but maybe. Who knows? We'll see. And there's a few sides to this question of what if Dwight stayed. The first thing is, what if we did the things necessary to keep Dwight? So essentially, what if, for example, the Magic let go of Stan when Dwight wanted the team to let him go? Essentially, I watched a documentary just this week. It was on Amazon Prime. I think it was done by Epix, the TV station Epix, whatever. Regardless, it was all about Dwight. And as a Magic fan, it was kind of hard to watch at times, particularly because some of the things that were said, some of the things that the narrator said were kind of skewed to make Dwight as the victim in Orlando and blah, 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 blah. You know, Dwight, at the end of the day, wasn't the victim in Orlando. Everything that happened to him, he created himself. But I could talk about that another day. One of the things that he talked about in the documentary, was very open about, was that he went to the front office, he went to the management and said, hey, I think this team needs a new voice in the locker room. I think it's time to let Stan go. And Dwight talks about in this documentary, he said it was weeks went by before he even heard a response, much less a yes or no from the team. And so weeks go by, he doesn't hear back, and then eventually the team comes back and says, I think we're going to stick with Stan for this time. And that didn't sit well with Dwight. From that point on, he was kind of bitter and frustrated with the franchise. Obviously, eventually, the team let go of Stan, and that still wasn't enough for Dwight, but it didn't happen exactly when Dwight wanted. So you could say, maybe if the Magic let go of Stan right on the spot, as soon as Dwight wanted it, maybe Dwight stays. I don't know if that would have been enough, but I'm honestly not sure that I would want it to be enough. We'll talk about that in a second, if we necessarily wanted Dwight to stay in the first place, but the other section of that is, what if the Magic convinced Dwight's other buddies to join the team? We remember this time. I mean, we brought in Glenn Big Baby Davis because of Dwight Howard. Let's be very clear. There was that laundry list of guys. I mean, who were some of those guys on that list?
If my memory serves me, you got Steven Jackson, Monte Ellis.
Yep, Josh Smith.
Josh Smith is a AAU buddy who's playing with right now. And a list of guys that just makes you scratch your head.
Absolutely. And the fact that we even entertain the idea, I understand we're trying to appease our superstar player. And again, probably if I was in that moment, I would have been trying to get those guys. But looking back, and especially knowing Dwight's, if you want to say character flaws, whatever that looks like, his indecisiveness, we'll just call it that. If we had tried to satisfy his desires for the team, we would have been in a real hole if we had started pulling guys left and right just because Dwight was friends with him or whatever. So you could argue, what if we let go of Stan as soon as Dwight wanted? What if we started bringing in more of Dwight's buddies to join the team? Would Dwight have stayed? I don't know if he would have. Honestly, probably. I'm glad those things didn't happen, like I said, because we would have been in a hole. But that's all what ifs that maybe could have persuaded Dwight, essentially. The big question, and this is what I want to get to, is what if Dwight did stay? You know, would we have continued on this track? Because let's not forget, 2009, 2010, we were one of the best teams in the league. Obviously, the actual playoffs, the year 2010, we were favored by many to win the whole dang thing, and probably should have won the whole thing if we didn't fall apart against Boston. That was kind of our downfall there. From then on, the team wasn't the same. So, do we continue that decline? Do we fall apart into mediocrity? I mean, you have to also think about his back injury. That doesn't change anything. None of this changes. Dwight got injured in Orlando. That back injury that haunted him for essentially 2 years, the year in Orlando and then the year in Los Angeles. Or does Dwight come back and then we go on another title run? What do you think? If Dwight stayed in Orlando, there was no Dwight Mayer, if you want to call it that. What does our team look like?
Well, I'll go ahead and say it. Be honest, I don't think we ever would have won a title with Dwight. You have to think 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014. I don't know if we would have had a better team than the Miami Heat did.
Yeah,
and that's the big, that's the big threat right there. I think it's kind of like I guess during the Jordan heyday years, and sometimes it's a good time to be a bad team because you're just not going to have a team. LeBron in his prime, you're not going to beat LeBron in his prime most likely. It's hard to. Same way with Jordan, and I'm. At the time, I was devastated by Dwight leaving. Yeah, it set us back a lot, and it's a debatable point whether him leaving was good or not. I'm on the same side with you. I think him leaving at the time when he did, and then the back injury thrown in there too, because that did happen while he was on the Magic. Right. So we don't get Vooch. We don't get Elfrid Payton. We still have some benefits coming in from that trade. Even we don't get Evan Fournier. So those are three players that I really like, and they're not Dwight, but Dwight's not Dwight. Yeah. So Dwight's not in that class anymore where he can win he can win a title as the best player on the team. I just don't think he is. Yeah.
Again, that's
what about you?
Yeah. I think it really comes down to that back injury. If we're talking about Dwight never being injured, let's not forget the back injury happened in Orlando. That's not something that happened later in Los Angeles or whatever. That's something that happened in Orlando, so that wouldn't have changed anything. Now, granted, did Dwight have a good attitude prior to the back injury? Obviously, that last season there was a mess. Again, he talked about, wanting Stan gone and wanting some roster changes and blah, 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 blah. Was his heart in Orlando? Probably not, but the back injury certainly didn't help. So, to answer the question, what if Dwight stayed? At the end of the day, we still don't know if Dwight's going to come back stronger. Obviously we talked a little bit earlier. Neither of us think he's going to be the Dwight of old, but there's a chance, he could come back. It's highly unlikely. Big men, especially as they grow older, they never reach that younger phase of their life when they're just, jumping out of the 30. Building. Yeah, exactly. So I agree with you. I don't think Dwight can be the superstar, I guess I should say the star player, the leader of a team that wins a championship. I don't see that happening. And so for that reason, honestly, I think things worked out really for the Orlando Magic that Dwight left when he did. Obviously, at the time with the drama that was going on and his essentially what was a indecision, if you will. I hate to use that term because everyone used it at the time, but it was good to get him out of the franchise. He was, and I don't want to use this term lightly because cancer is used to a lot of really not quality guys in locker rooms, which Dwight was a quality guy for the majority of his career. But at the end of that time in Orlando, he was a cancer. He was a problem. It really weighed down on our guys. And when we got rid of him, you could tell that burden was lifted.
Definitely. And, the reason it's a good thing that he didn't stay is mostly, like you said, due to the back injury. I think if that never happens and Dwight's still that guy, he's the best center in the league and still a defensive player of the year candidate. Yeah. We probably have a different answer to that question. Yeah. But it's mostly to do with him not being the player who he is anymore, right. And the fact that we got Vooch, who was looked at as kind of a shoe-in with that trade. Yeah. Vooch is now one of the best centers in the league. Yeah. So, it just worked out. Yeah. I think we're the winner in that deal. Definitely not Philly. Definitely not LA.
Yeah, for sure. We talk about the injury. We could also talk about Dwight's attitude. I'm glad we traded his attitude, honestly, because like we talked about, the end of his time in Orlando was a mess. He didn't want to be here. And so for that reason, if you don't want to be here, you can get out. It's okay. We'll rebuild and we'll move on, and we've already started that, and the future is very bright. So,
And there's no question he looks back at Orlando as his best years.
Oh, yeah. Here's the deal. One of these days, when Dwight's old and retired, he's going to write a book.
He'll do an expose.
Yeah, he's going to write a book, or he's going to do an interview, and he's going to talk about his glory days in Orlando, and he's going to say exactly what Shaq said just a few weeks ago. I wish I had stayed there longer. Shaq said that just weeks ago. I wish I had given Orlando more of a chance. We had a great team. And obviously we made the finals and blah, 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 blah. I was so young. I was so hungry to win. I left. And I think one of these days we're going to hear Dwight. Dwight's story obviously isn't similar. He was in Orlando for 8 seasons. But it would be more of maybe he has been open that he wishes he left in a different way. But I think one of these days he's going to realize how good he had it in Orlando. And he's going to be open about it and say, yeah, I screwed up.
Yeah, I think he misses being the big fish in the small pond.
I think he does too. But those things we may never know. So, those are our big what ifs, our 5 big categories. We talked about the draft. We talked about the potential big 3 in 2000. We talked about the new arena deal. We talked about the 2009 finals. And we talked about what if Dwight stayed. Did we miss a big what if in Orlando Magic history? If we did, feel free to tweet us at MenInBluePod. We'd love to hear some of your big Orlando Magic what ifs. So, that's the big chunk of our podcast for today. As always, we close out with some extra stuff dealing with the Orlando Magic. The biggest thing coming up now are some FIBA tournaments. We have a handful of international stars on our roster. The FIBA Americas, featuring our own Andrew Nicholson and newly acquired Edgem. One guy that we'll be interested to see if he makes our roster. I think he probably will. Coming in as the season nears. Anyway, they're playing the FIBA Americas for Team Canada. That starts this week. I think their first game is September the 1st. Don't quote me on that. I do know that next week Eurobasket begins. We get some looks at our new rookie Mario Hezonja playing for Croatia, as well as Evan Fournier. That kicks off on September the 5th. In case you're wondering, Nik Vucevic, his beloved Montenegro men's national team, did not qualify for Eurobasket, so we won't get to see him, but that's okay. He can take some time off and get ready for the new season. But it'll be interesting to see these guys coming up for the next few weeks. I know just recently we saw Mario Hezonja, some highlights from him. There was a friendly, basically a warm-up game against Bosnia and Herzegovina, and he put on a show, 24 points, 6 rebounds in 20 minutes. He lit it up.
Oof.
My favorite part of this, though, if you haven't seen the highlights, you need to go back and watch it. Dying seconds of the game, Croatia is up 15, and Hezonja hits a 3. I think it was like 8 seconds left in the game to put them up 18. So he launches a 3. He holds the pose. He's staring down the 3. It goes in, and then he turns around to the opposing coach and gives him a high five. I tell you what, I think we're going to love this kid. He's a little firecracker. He might get into trouble sometimes, might get a few tees, whatever. It'll be fun to watch. We'll add a little life to this team, and that'll be fun to watch. One more thing. We talked about Evan Fournier. We'll see him coming up here in Eurobasket with France. Last little tidbit about the Magic, and we'll call it a day. There's been talks about potential contract extension for him. I'm trying to think. I guess his deal doesn't end this year, but he ends coming up next year, the year after. I don't remember what. You probably have more details on that than I do.
Yeah, he's under contract through this year and next year. He's a restricted free agent in the next offseason, and then he's unrestricted the year after that. So he makes $2.28 million a year right now, which I think is a great contract for the type of player that he is.
Yep.
He's a great player off the bench. He can light it up. He's an offense injector.
Yep.
And
seems like a good guy in the locker room as well.
Yeah, totally. He's a fun guy. I follow his Instagram. He seems like a great guy to have on your team. And it's going to be interesting to see what he asks for. I think, with the new contract, with the new TV deal that's come up, it's boosted the cap, up to $108 million after for the 2016-17 season.
Right.
So a $2.2 million player, I don't think he thinks of him that way, and even under the current CBA. So it wouldn't shock me if he's asking for, maybe $10 million a year. What about you?
Yeah, we've had this conversation before. I'm still having a very difficult time wrapping my mind around these numbers that we're starting to see and will continue to see as this new deal starts to kick in. It's hard for me to, again, we talked about some of the deals that were happening this summer, these outrageous numbers that my jaw drops every time because I'm old school, whatever. I still think of you really have to be elite to make this amount of money. But, you know, in this current climate, $10 million wouldn't surprise me.
The bar has been raised, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I don't see him quite making 10. Maybe I'm looking at 6, 7, 8 million range. But one thing I do know is that I think the team is wise in trying to lock him up now. Again, because this TV money is coming soon. Players can be asking for more and more money as these years go by.
Mm-hmm. And who knows what kind of jump he makes.
Right, exactly, yeah. And more than anything, I think it'll be interesting to see how he fits within our roster now. One, obviously, a new coach, Scott Skiles, who, you know, every new coach brings his understanding and his way of utilizing each player. And the second thing will be we now have this other guy named Mario Hezonja who can fit this role coming in off the bench. You know, it'll be interesting to see how much playing time Fournier gets. Part of me thinks that perhaps the Magic front office sees Fournier still improving this year and progressing. That's why we're trying to lock him up now, so he doesn't have a great year, and then teams come knocking next year and offer bukus of money. I don't know. I'd like to see us lock him up again for a reasonable amount, but I'd like to see us go ahead and get this extension done. Will it happen? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I think he could probably come out and ask for 4 years, $40 million or something like that. And I would think about it. I think I'd like to see a little bit of this year and see what kind of player he might be coming and go from there. Yeah. You know, FIBA's a good sample size, yeah, I suppose, but that's a tough call. And I like him on our team going forward. Yeah. He's a young guy. I think he fits well with our young, our other young guys.
Yeah, definitely.
So we'll see.
Yeah. So those are a couple things to be looking out for with these FIBA tournaments. Again, Team Canada, Croatia, and France will be the ones that we'll be watching as Orlando Magic fans. So again, we're kind of in this off-season time here, still waiting for training camp, which is right around the corner, which is awesome. But in the meantime, we'll have to watch some international basketball and root for our guys. Not only root for our guys to succeed and improve, but please don't get injured. That's all we ask. Just no injuries of our guys playing for their national teams. That's all we ask.
Way to jinx it.
Yeah, I know. I probably shouldn't have said that. Dang it. Oh well. So anyway, that about wraps us up for this episode here of the Men in Blue podcast. Again, reach out to us. You can find us on Twitter at Men in Blue Pod or on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Men in Blue Pod, or hit us up on Reddit. We hang out in the Orlando Magic subreddit quite often. We'll post there from time to time and interact with you guys and gals over there. Feel free to hit us up over there as well. Again, any tips, suggestions for us, hit us up there on the social media worlds. We'd love to hear from you. Coming up, some episodes coming on down the road. We'll continue with some more season preview stuff, looking at some player profiles, some coaching profiles. We've got obviously a new head coach and new assistant coaches. We'll be looking at some of those guys and how they fit into our team and so forth. We look forward to going through all of that with you as we count down the days to some Orlando Magic basketball. Adam Elamari, it's been a pleasure. Any last thoughts?
That's it. Thanks, Kev. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Absolutely. I'm Kevin Tucker. That's Adam Elamari. You've been listening to the Men in Blue podcast. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.
The Men in Blue podcast is in no way, shape, or form affiliated with the Orlando Magic organization. It's a podcast made for fans, by fans. Men in Blue, go Magic.